This is the Project Management Podcast. We bring project management to beginners and experts. Find us on the web at pm-podcast.com or send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com. Hello and welcome to episode number 170. I am Cornelius Fichtner. This is the Project Management Podcast. It's very nice to have you with us. What would you say is the single biggest change that has occurred in the area of program management between 1981 and now? Did it make a difference if you had a project management certification in 1981 and wanted to get a program management job versus today? Or what skills did a program manager need in 1981 and today? Well, if you think that these are some more questions out of Jeff Furman's project management answer book that we discussed in our last episode, well, then you'd be wrong. Instead, these are the questions that I asked Scotty Bates. Scotty currently works for Robbins Joya, and he has been actively involved in project and in particular in program management for the last 30 years. So let's look at what these changes are and learn how they influence how much better or how much worse we manage programs today. I also wanted to thank everybody who participated in our 20 books giveaway. We had purchased 20 copies of Peter Taylor's latest project management book, The Lazy Blogger, and we had an incredible number of people signing up to win one of them on our Facebook fan page. I'm not going to read out the names of the winners here, don't worry, but we had 10 winners from among our free listeners, and we had 10 winners from among our paying premium subscribers. And at the same time, I also learned that I've been using Facebook all wrong all this time. So if you have ever placed a comment on our Facebook fan page on the wall and you never ever got a comment back from me, well, that's because I haven't seen it. I need to click another button in order to see your comments as well. Sorry about that. So communication should now increase via our Facebook fan page. In any case, the winning names of the 20 people who get The Lazy Blogger from Peter Taylor have been published on facebook.com/PM podcast. Scotty Bates brings over 29 years of leadership experience in project and program management, IT professional services, and defense acquisition to Robbins Joya. One of them was an engagement with U.S. Customs and Border Protection, supporting their $3.5 billion automated commercial environment modernization IT program. That's a mouthful. He most recently managed a team that delivered various program management services to the State Department's Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, developing an MS SharePoint Services solution for one of the major initiatives, and delivered several foundational program management documents and set in motion various process improvement activities. And now, fire up that flux capacitor, because we're going back in time. Enjoy the interview.
Project Management Podcasts Feature Interview.
Today with Scotty Bates, Executive Consultant for Robbins Joya.
Hello, Scotty, and welcome to the Project Management Podcast.
Well, thank you, Cornelius. It's my pleasure to be here.
We want to talk about program management then and now. So to get us started, why don't we start with you and your career? Because then and now means that you'd have to be able to compare the then and the now. So what was your involvement in program management in the past?
Well, my first experience with program management was in 1981 when I was sent to be on the staff of the Naval Air Systems Command in Washington, D.C., where I led the engineering development responsibility for the Navy jet trainer program that was in the middle of source selection. And from that point, I've been involved in some manner of program management, either defense acquisition procurement or information technology since.
All right, so you were on the leading side of program management, right? So you weren't an executing project manager, you actually managed the programs themselves. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, I had sort of the core responsibility for the primary element of a major aircraft development program.
Okay. And when we originally discussed an outline of our interview today, one thing that you mentioned that I found interesting was the following statement. You said project managers were risk managers. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think it's core to program and project management. It has been even since 1981 or before. The big three, if you will, in the PMI parlance of cost, schedule, and performance. It's sort of the risk equation in one sense. In those days, as well as now, the risks associated with any program in the area of cost, schedule, and of the ultimate performance of what you're trying to accomplish with the program are what the program management, to me, is all about. So the risks themselves have become much more formalized, and that's certainly another topic we could get further into. But view a risk or program manager is essentially being one who manages the risks, the known, the unknown, and the risks as they occur throughout the life cycle of a program or project.
Okay, so if I get you right here, what we're saying is that if you have program management happening in your organization, major part of what you are doing is managing the risks on the individual projects to ensure that you have success on the projects and therefore on the program.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So then and now, in your view, what is the single biggest difference between program management in when you started 1981 and today?
I would say probably one of the bigger or the single biggest difference is the advances in the IT space. All the information that's available to a program manager today was not there 30 years ago, at least not to the extent that it is. I mean, most processes were manual. It was very early days of the personal computer. Very few databases or the ability to transmit information rapidly, either within the program or different locations that the program and its projects might exist, just didn't exist. So I think the IT world itself is probably one of the I'll say the starker difference between then and now.
Right. Is it a positive change or a negative change from your point of view?
Well, I think it's both. I think it's largely positive, but the negative side is that it's a challenge to, I think, deal with the massive amount of information that's out there, which wasn't really as big a problem 30 years ago.
And by massive information, you're referring to all the data about the project that we were getting in through IT, right? How many hours and minutes Joe has worked on it, and all the events that are happening on the project through status reporting and things like that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And because of that, I think there's a greater demand, at least in the government arena, for more detailed information, at least from the oversight and governance bodies such as Congress and the GAO, and even within individual departments. Because data can be kept to a much greater extent than in the past, people expect to see more detail driven uphill, if you will.
And you said it's both positive and negative. I assume one of the positive parts has to be the fact that the number crunching can happen much faster and much quicker. I'm thinking in particular of earned value management, which in 1981, if you did it, you probably would have had to do it by hand. And now it is done pretty much automatically, right?
Well, I think that's certainly an area. The earned value management 30 years ago was pretty much done on mainframes and mid-range computers, larger computers. You didn't have the PCs of today and the power to do that sort of analysis was at a higher level. One of the first programs I worked on, the prime contractor had a fairly detailed value management system in place, and they generated all that data, out of their mainframe system. So it was there, but it wasn't as readily available or as efficiently done as it is today. Mm. So that's clearly one area that's that kind of data is important, and I think but that data doesn't do any good if the program isn't planned properly and the data isn't baselined against, I'll say, a schedule that's achievable and really reflects the details of the project at hand.
Yeah, I think you make a good point right here, because even though I think that IT has changed so much and has opened up so much, if you don't do the program management as such correctly, it doesn't matter whether you have a fast computer or a slow computer, right? It just you're not doing it right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what kind of processes are then supported today with IT that you can do in these days that didn't exist or were pretty much unthinkable in 1981?
Well, I think there's some better statistical analysis tools that have to do with cost estimating and to get sort of independent cost estimates that are probably have better fidelity than they did 30 years ago, particularly in the IT world. The CRSIM modeling and things like that are, I don't think, at least I wasn't aware that they existed back then. If they did, they certainly weren't very prevalent. The various other models were there. So I think the whole ability to do statistical analysis is certainly helpful in many areas, not just cost estimating. Okay.
And when we look at all the available IT that's out there for us project managers now, is one thing that I seem to notice at least is that project managers rely far too much on the tools that they have. Do you feel that we've become slave to our tools?
I think in some cases that's true, and it's just because it's readily available. You get much better, business intelligence out of some of the software stacks that are available today, and you become reliant on having that information. And not only that, I just think the oversight bodies expect to see that kind of detail. So you pretty much have to make sure the information you're getting out of your program, whether it be the schedule information or cost information or any other detail associated with the development or the project itself, depending on what type of project it is there and is accurate as it can be. So that in some sense certainly makes you a slave to it, but there's so much of it that then that can become the negative we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. A few years ago, PMI launched the PGMP, the Program Management Professional. What kind of a role did certifications play then and now when it comes to managing large programs?
Well, when I first started in this, to become a major program manager certainly within the DoD world, you had to have a certain amount of experience, but you also had to go through the Defense System Management College's program management course, which was the long course, if you will. And so to become qualified, if you will, or certified as a major program manager, you had to have that course. PMI and the PMP itself wasn't really as prevalent within either DoD or the federal government space. But Robbins-Gioia, who I'm with now, has actually started working with the PMI in 1980 and we like to think we've helped develop the profession of program management through that relationship. So over the course of time, there were several, I'll say, keynote events or milestone events that happened around the Washington, D.C. arena to try to more formalize program management within this space, certainly. Not the least of which was the passing of the Defense Acquisition Workforce Improvement Act in '92, I believe it was, and that's where the DoD certainly was the leader in this to more formalize the types of certification and qualifications that were required for people to operate within not only the program management field, but many other specific disciplines within the federal government. So each civil service career field, if you will, that had anything to do with acquisition, had some certification levels established. And that was an attempt to give the overall, we'll say, career progression from entry-level people that would attain a level 1 certification in their particular professional expertise up to level 3 certifications. Those today are done pretty much, or the decision on whether to award somebody a level 3 cert is at the department level, but the Defense System Management College's program manager course is no longer the only way that somebody can become certified. In fact, the DSMC is now the Defense Acquisition University, and they're still the body that helps manage those certifications and provide some of the courses. The other nuance of what's going on, though, is that the PMP is, in fact, an element of level 3 certification. So it's grown from a DoD-specific mandate, if you will, to one that's across the federal government, wherein many of the program managers that manage large programs, whether it be IT or otherwise, or even IT, I should say, have to have a level 3 certification by their department, and to do that, the PMP is a requirement. So it's the whole nature of certifications has become, I'll say, more widespread within the federal government, and it's grown outside the DoD since at least 1994 to today. So in the past 16 years, we've seen people that have a major program management responsibility within various parts of the government have to have that certification. And in fact, it's attested to in the various budget submissions, business cases that go to OMB and Congress for approval for the budgets they're asking for large IT programs and others. And there's a certification in it that says that the program manager is level 3 certified and has, and as part of that, they need a PMP. So it's grown to, I think, to be a little bit, quite a bit more important than what it was, and certainly PMI in the PMP world has, I guess, I don't know, balloon might be one way to look at it.
Yeah, but I think that, the whole certification, that's just one side of the equation, because that's the piece of paper that says, we have tested you and you have passed this particular exam. The other side of the equation is, of course, the skills that the program manager needs, the experience that they need to have on the job. So let's talk a little bit about skills of the program manager that are needed. Do you see any specific skills of a program manager between today versus then that have increased, decreased, or that you just have to have today, otherwise you'll never be successful?
Well, I think the fundamental, I'll say, qualities, if you will, or skills that a program manager needs aren't any different. The one exception to that is that I think in today's IT world, you certainly have to be more conversant with things that that information technology can provide to you and know how to utilize them. Whereas 30 years ago, it wasn't necessarily the case. So somebody that couldn't use the personal computer or an application or understand, how to get, how to get a presentation together or utilize the databases that are out there or look at a schedule and read schedule information. Those are still fundamental, but you didn't necessarily need to know how to do all of that per se at a PM level. You had to have people around you that understood those things. But I think today PMs need to be able to do a little bit more of that than they did in the past. And each of these certification levels is set up to give that generates the need to have a certain amount of experience at each level to get from one to the next, in addition to the skill sets that are set out within those competencies.
Right. What are some of the other skills that you would say it doesn't matter whether you ran a program then or today, you just have to have those?
Well, I think you need to certainly know how to work with people, to lead people. I don't use the word manage because I think you manage things and you lead people, and that's sort of a common misnomer some people make. But so you have to be good with people. You have to be conversant enough with your program that you can articulate the risk and issues that are associated with what's going on at any one point in time. You have to be good at briefing upper level management and oversight folks. I don't think that's any different. So I think the fundamental qualities of being able to juggle a lot of balls at the same time in the air is there today as it was 30 years ago. Okay.
One question that my listeners, or my students rather, always ask me when we're talking about skills and what do you need to have, be it as a project manager or as a program manager, is where do I get those skills? Because at some point, you start out with zero and you have to work your way into a particular role. Where would you say is the best place for our listeners to start acquiring these skills that they need in order to grow into a program management role?
Well, I think working on a program or a project is sort of a flip answer, but I mean, I think that's also true. I think you have to be in the trenches. The other part, or another aspect of it, in my mind, is that program management in project management is not a simple thing per se. There are many disciplines within it that people spend their entire lives as professionals in those disciplines. And a quick example is there are people that spend a career in scheduling. There are master schedulers. There are professional certifications in each of those kinds of disciplines. Or in value management, you mentioned earlier, is one of those. So you kind of have to, I would recommend that people find a project, work in an area that they may have an interest in, and then see what within program and project management is most attractive to them, and then start finding positions that allow you to work in that field, that part of that specific discipline within project management, and grow from there. Mm-hmm. At some point, the more senior you become, the more you're able to move from one discipline to another and gather, and I'll say a better overview or a broader perspective of what's required within program management.
All right. Let's move into the present and then also take a look into the future. You are currently with Robbins Joya, and our listeners are familiar with the company. We've had Pat Zorns, one of your colleagues, on the program before, and we've learned from her what kind of offerings Robbins Joya has in the PMO space, Project Management Office. Now, let's talk about what you do for the company. Do you personally provide program management services for the company as well?
Well, I have done that. I mean, my current role is in business development, but the most recent experience I had was leading a small team of people we had under contract with a bureau within the State Department, and we did several things there. So we kind of like to look at program management. We're having three basic elements, and this is fairly commonplace in the industry today. And that's essentially there's the people, process, and tools aspect to everything. So, in fact, if you look at our logo, the triangle sort of represents that, the people, process, and tool elements of any consulting engagement in the PM arena. So one of the challenges that we undertook was to develop a Microsoft Office SharePoint solution for that bureau, so they could utilize that on one of their major initiatives. So at the end of the day, they actually did have a tool that was using their SharePoint space across, I don't know, they're not just the 10 countries that the initiative was associated with, but 100 and some countries across the world. So that was sort of a tool piece, if you will. Then we spent a fair amount of time developing some fundamental program management documentation, such as a program management plan, a communications plan, things of that nature that are just fundamental to good program and project management, which they really didn't have in place, which is one of the principal reasons we were there. They were trying to affect some standardization and improvement in their use of program and project management disciplines. The other main thrust of that particular effort was in the process arena. We did a fair amount of process development, looked at we developed an overarching roadmap for them to improve the strategic level when you start talking about roles and responsibilities and defining those across the Bureau, and then which then enables them to do some resource alignment, if you will, and rationalization. And then down at the sort of the grassroots level of where are they from a CMMI perspective, level 1 to and up. So they were basically in the level 1 arena, and we laid out a roadmap of effort that would get them to level 2 if they started to undertake that. And that took the better part of a year to get to those. In addition to that, we automated a couple of their key processes that they use routinely. And those were embedded with certain automated forms and things like that within the SharePoint world. So from a PM perspective, we addressed the process improvement, fundamental documentation to help structure some consistency, if you will, developed a process asset library, if you will, that was also put on the SharePoint solution. And then they had a web portal to share their information across the 100 and some odd countries they dealt with. So that was probably my most recent involvement with delivering a solution to our customers.
Right. Sounds like a major effort. Were you involved in this full-time during the whole year, or is this more a part-time for you as a consultant?
It was pretty much, I was probably 80 to 90% there. I was full-time, but I had a couple other ad hoc things that I got tasked with. But I managed the whole team and had direct involvement on a weekly and almost daily basis with what we were doing. All
right. So that's the present. Let's take a look into the future. And this is probably the most difficult question that I have for you. It's also the final question. Where do you see program management? Well, let's see. About 30 years. Where do you see it in 30 years from now?
It's a good question. Well, I think there's some things that won't change. I think the type of individuals that can effectively manage a large program and lead people to affect outcomes that are desired, those qualities won't change. It is perhaps reasonable to expect that a lot of the automation we're seeing in the advances in the IT world that are giving us all a lot more capability to track and measure and report on information will hopefully get more efficient. So some of the things we deal with today that are still tedious, even though there's a lot of IT capability, that they'll become more efficient. So maybe a much greater use of, standards and templates and things that just make the routine tasks for planning a program and then monitoring it during the execution of the program become simpler. And then hopefully we'll get to be a little bit more accurate with our predictions of what things can happen. Some of that's not going to change in the DoD arena, I don't think, or the federal government, because there's a lot of activity where the outcome is not something that can be managed at the program level, because you get so many people in a governance role or oversight and governance role that can change what you need to be doing, irrespective of the needs of the program. So there's only so much flexibility that you'll have. I don't think that's going to change. I think the program manager of the future will be essentially the same kind of individual as they are today. But I would hope that the efficiencies of I'll say the processes and tools around the large efforts are better than they are today.
Well, thank you very much for this outlook. And Scotty, thanks a lot for having been on the program with us today. Appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And that was Robbins Joya's Scotty Bates, looking at the past, present, and the future of program management. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. If you are a project manager who wants to become a PMP, then the easiest way to do so is with our sister podcast, the Project Management Prepcast, and study for the exam by watching over 38 hours of video training from pmprepcast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com, and when you write, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. Here's a little twist on the old saying, bad news travels fast for project managers. It goes like this: bad projects travel fast to the next project manager. Until next time,